Well, hello and welcome to today's webcast, Delivering the Insurance Customer of the Future Experience, sponsored by Oz Digital Consulting and hosted by Insurance Innovation Reporter. I'm Anthony O'Donnell, editor of Insurance Innovation Reporter, and it's my pleasure to be your moderator today. We'd like to thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. And I'm not advancing my slides for some reason. There we go. I'd like to take a moment just to review how the event will proceed today. After speaker introductions and a few words from me about the topic, our three speakers will give presentations. Following that, we'll have an open panel discussion on the topic. Now, the old-fashioned way of doing these webinars is to have three long presentations followed by a Q&A. But since we're doing a panel discussion, the whole thing, or a substantial part of the event, will be Q&A. So for that reason, we'll be taking questions throughout the event. And I encourage our attendees to ask a question whenever it occurs to them, and we'll do our best to introduce those to the conversation. And you can do that by, you can submit questions by typing them into the questions box, which you can access by clicking on the Q&A tab on the control panel. That will open the dialog box for you to type your question in. Okay, now some introductions to our speakers. I'm really excited about this panel today. When we assembled the panel, I thought this is a really high quality group of individuals, and I'm sure we'll have a very interesting and lively discussion, not least because our first speaker is Nicole Myers. Some of our attendees may recall that Nicole spoke in a recent IIR webinar sponsored by Oz. And at that time, Nicole was Senior Vice President at Swiss Re. Now she's Chief Underwriter for Ethos. Prior to her role at Swiss Re, Nicole worked with MIB to launch the company's electronic health record initiative in the US market. As her experience suggests, her background is in life insurance underwriting. And in a further development highly relevant to our topic today, Nicole recently earned a master's degree in behavioral economics. Our second speaker today is Craig Welsh, Chief Distribution Officer at Westfield Insurance. Craig is responsible for developing, implementing, and evolving strategy on an enterprise level for distribution management, ensuring alignment with corporate and competitive business strategies, optimizing channel partnership and performance, and establishing deep insight into the evolution occurring in P&C distribution. And of course, Craig will give us some really great insights into the issues of customer experience that have to do with the carrier-distributor relationship. And our final speaker today is Mark Smith, President of Oz Digital's Global Insurance Practice. Mark is responsible for executing strategies and industry solutions to enable clients in the P&C insurance industry to increase customer engagement and experience, drive profitable growth and operational excellence through digital transformation, intelligent workflow automation, application modernization, and data integration and analytics. Mark has over 35 years of operational and technology experience in the insurance industry, playing key roles in strategy formulation, operations, general management, technology, distribution, sales, and marketing. So Mark will have some great observations on all those things today. Prior to joining Oz, he was Vice President and Senior Partner with IBM Consulting, the Managing Director and Global Head of Insurance for Alix Partners Enterprise Improvement Practice, and Head of IT and Operations for the Americas region at Zurich Insurance Group. All right, now a few of my thoughts on our topic today. When we were discussing how to position this event, we had some difficulty deciding whether we should call it Delivering the Insurance Customer Experience of the Future or the Experience of the Customer of the Future. We decided on the latter in the end because if there's a single thing that makes the customer experience of the future different, it's the qualitative way in which insurers not only interact with, but understand the customer. No doubt sometime in the near future, we will all have had enough of talking about the pandemic, but that time is not here yet. This is the first time I've participated in an event specifically dedicated to the insurance customer relationship, and I can't help thinking of the pandemic as an important milestone. It forced us all to live more in the virtual world. It emphasized the importance of digital transformation work in the IT organization. And of course, it changed the way IT officers and their teams worked. Many IT executives have told me that it accelerated both their digital agendas and their work, which is to say their accomplishments within that agenda. The unanticipated success of remote teamwork actually made insurers more ambitious about what they might be able to accomplish in the digital vein within a given timeline. It resulted in not only more attention to the technologies of virtual experience, but more confidence in adopting and experimenting with those technologies. That in turn made it easier to visualize a new kind of customer experience based at least in part on technologies that seemed daunting prior to the pandemic. However, as with any step in the evolution of business technology, it is never simply about technology, but also largely about how technology can support human interaction. Of course, that's very much the case with today's topic. So in the case of the customer experience of the future, or the experience of the customer of the future, that means achieving a greater understanding of the customer of the future. So I always thought the term customer intimacy was kind of creepy and inappropriate, and I was happy when it seemed to have gone out of style. However, as I think about the customer of the future, I can't help thinking of that term. Technology is enabling more and more refinement in service, and customers who get a taste of that want more of it. And so the question insurers have to ask is, what do customers want? Well, we could say that they want more intimacy, or at least the products of that intimacy. The question on the slide implies a much deeper understanding of who the individual customer is in the first place. I've included the image of Dr. Freud here because we're getting into a deeper analysis of what drives the customer's behavior and who that customer is as an individual. The heading is also a paraphrase of a question famously asked by the psychoanalyst in the spirit of perplexity as to the possible answer. Now, as our panelists will discuss, customers actually want to be known by the companies they transact with so that those companies can anticipate their expectations as a customer. And so insurers need both to better understand the customer so that they can better deliver service to the customer. And that also means that in understanding the individual consumer, insurers need to be able to personalize customer experience. Customers have always valued convenience, and now they expect it, and they expect it on a higher level. Insurers need to analyze both the customer and the experience to a higher level, crafting the experience to a new standard generally, and also tailoring it to the individual. If I were to summarize, I'd say that the customer of the future experience has to be understood not merely as more convenient, effective, and efficient as a transaction, but as an aesthetic experience that reinforces a positive association with the insurer. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our behavioral economist, Nicole Myers.
All right. Just 1 second. And can you hear me all right?
We hear you fine. You sound great.
Fantastic. So give me just 1 second. The resident behavioral economist. I don't know if we can go quite that far. Still, I think I'm still going to own the chief underwriter right now. With some secondary expertise in behavioral economics.
Fair enough.
So for everybody who's gathered with us here today, again, I am Nicole Myers. I am the chief underwriter at Ethos. And this is all very, very near and dear. We are a digital distributor and a TPA, and we work very hard to create a differentiated customer experience. So I'm super happy to be talking about this particular topic. I think it's really good to level set and understand that consumer behavior at its core has drivers, right? These kind of very fundamental drivers. A person is coming in for a purchase, and there's a goal to that, right? They are looking for something very specifically, and they've come to you not as a blanc tabula rasa, right? They have experiences in their past. They have memories. They're connected to other brands, and they have context around these purchases. And when we're thinking about consumer behavior and the drivers, we need to take all of this relative together. The memory is very interesting, and I work specifically in the life insurance space. Do you have good or bad experiences historically with the insurance companies that you've worked with? How is that kind of crafting this experience? You may have a goal of purchasing a policy with us, but you might be bringing along a lot of baggage with that particular purchase when you actually approach it. So even though you know it's something that you need, it doesn't make it, it doesn't free it from any kind of historical exposure you might have had. And that's not even necessarily firsthand experience for a lot of individuals. I think what's so interesting is they may have heard something. They may have been the beneficiary of a policy and had difficulty actually getting the proceeds. So all of that kind of goes into the approach as consumers come into our funnel. And whether or not they're consciously thinking about those things, it's absolutely going to set their expectation as they're coming through quote an experience. Also, the context is incredibly important. I think we typically find that while the goal is to purchase the policy, the context, that driver, is often not always the most positive experience. Sometimes it's something like a large purchase, like a house. It could be the birth of a child. That's fantastic. But sometimes it's the loss of a loved one. Sometimes it's living through the negative downside of actually not being the Benny of policy, right? So understanding the context and being able to level set in your flow so that you can start to orientate that customer experience around the customer behavior is incredibly important. So I have a deeply held belief that underwriting very much defines and can control the customer experience. We'll talk a bit about that on some of my further slides, because at the same time, underwriting is pulling farther and farther behind the scenes in many products, and really the experience and the friction that is created by a lot of the questions that we use to underwrite and assess people. All of that is kind of sinking into the background. So what can we learn from our partners in marketing? What can we learn from the people around us who study the people who come to us? And why is it important for us to understand these things about consumers and brand? If we look at the research that's come out, consumers are looking for hyper-personalized shopping experience, not a creepy shopping experience, right? Because I think we've all had the creepy shopping experience where we say something and then our phone is advertising it to us. So we don't necessarily want to go that far, but that personalization, making sure that we are offering the things that are appropriate, age appropriate, location appropriate, whatever that is, to the individual who's come to the funnel. And these are the things, that's like a natural thing that a face-to-face kind of table sale would have been, right? That filtering would have been happening in the background. We need to make sure we're recreating that for our digital experiences. Customized content, personalized shopping experiences. These are things that really increase positivity around brand. And obviously the statistics vary, and some carriers are more comfortable talking about it than others, but some of the largest life carriers that I've worked with have actually very low brand recognition. So until that individual applicant came in and bought the policy, they weren't even aware of that particular brand. And that means that you have this opportunity to start to create that affinity, because it actually doesn't exist there. So that is an unbelievably important thing to know, that hyper-personalization, that really tailored experience is what starts to create those hooks. 94% of consumers, and this is, I'll draw your attention down to the lower left-hand side of the screen, 94% of consumers show brand loyalty when they feel like they have complete product transparency. So I want to pause on that, because complete product transparency and insurance products are not things that have always gone hand in hand historically, right? So important. Just because we are a highly regulated industry doesn't mean we can divest from the way the human brain works or the way that people feel. And so we really need to figure out those proof points for transparency in our process so that we can start to build these very strong, meaningful relationships with our customers. Context and goals, bringing people to us. What we know of those past experiences, incredibly important as applicants are coming into the funnel, and then being able to get ahead of that, being able to pull on those marketing levers that I was just showing you. 60% of consumers want to see video content. Show them some video content, right? Start to really bring these pieces into your buying experience. Because what you'll find is that we've been so focused, I think, over the last, 15 plus years on how do we be faster? How do we automate? How do we bring these pieces back? The problem is, if we're doing everything right, our customers aren't going to care. They're not going to care about us because they're actually not going to be experiencing kind of that opportunity to make a memory with us. That opportunity for positive brand or positive friction is another thing that I wanted to mention here, right? That the human brain is actually attuned to remember things when they go very, very wrong. That's a safety mechanism. We should remember when we had a highly negative experience. We should remember when we rounded the corner and the saber-toothed tiger was chasing us. We should remember these negative experiences because they keep us safe in the future. So when an individual comes into the underwriting or insurance buying experience and they are experiencing nonstop friction, and it's taken them weeks and months in order to get a policy, or they have to call 100 times to get their deck page, or whatever has happened to them, that negative friction is what's creating the experience. And a lot of times that is actually dampening the shopping in the future. The process is just so hard, they don't want to go through it again. And so they're like, I would rather just pay my renewal premium and stick around than have to live through that. And I think our industry has recognized across lines that we didn't want that. We don't want you to stay because it was a negative experience. We want you to stay because it's a positive brand experience and a positive experience. But we have to recognize that the more seamless we get, the more flawless we get, the faster that we make that experience, the less memorable we actually are. And so these are the pieces. I still want us to be pulling back and leveraging automation and using AI and all of these wonderful tools we have. But what are we replacing the human element and that time and that friction with? What are we doing to actually recreate those hooks? So a couple of high opportunities here, right? Being able to monitor, and there's some great monitoring tools that are out there right now for digital experiences where you can take a look at how long it takes to answer questions, if people are struggling to actually be able to respond to you, or if they're abandoning their applications, right? Listening to your agents, call listening, talking to your customer service reps, finding these friction points, finding these points where somebody might be dropping off, right? Understanding where they're skipping through sections, where they're skipping through actions, and where they're already doing the filtering in the human processes to recreate these positive experiences where right now there are negative experiences. So you want to monitor and find what's bad, and then you want to figure out what you're going to do to actually make that a stickier, better, more memorable experience, not just about making it disappear into the background, but about using that opportunity as ad space. And remembering that every single touch point that you have with a customer, with an applicant, that's ad space. And in the face-to-face sale, every agent knows that intuitively. Like, good ones know. Every time I'm in front of you, this is my time to shine. This is my time to sell. We need to know that every time we touch a customer, that is ad space for us. Whether that's call service script, a form, an administrative follow-up, a letter in the mail, an e-app, we're creating completely unique touch points that we might not have today, right? Actually going in and saying, we have the opportunity to actually reach out more. And what is that reach out going to look like? So, I would say more individuals need to have warmer, fuzzy relationships with the marketing professionals, look into the behavioral economics community as well, because there's a growing community of people who are really, really passionate about the intersection of human behavior and financial decision making. Don't forget about your user groups and testing. But remember, we want to make it a better process, and that's absolutely fantastic, but we can't just disappear into the background because the human brain is designed to forget you if you do everything right.
Audience question for you, Nicole. How do you personalize what you call the ad space?
How do you personalize the ad space? I think in a digital experience, you can build personas of customers, right? So you can start to look across your applicant pool, individuals who've come in, understand what the drivers are, their behavior. Are these customers that are likely to persist? Are they customers that might lapse right early? Like, what are those tweaks? So you need to be using your own data, and then you need to be intervening earlier, right, to actually provide those types of interventions. You can collect data points like, why are you here today? You can ask that question, right? And that's a common question I think that's asked in a lot of early workflows. Use that. Do something with the data. A lot of times we ask questions, we never follow up on them, right? So you've probably got something or things within the existing applicant flow and quote flow that you could already pull out and bring back to an individual, do some canned content there, right? Where you know that XYZ type persona gets this. And you might be able to A/B test depending on your setup as well to see kind of what works better with what particular population of people. But you probably have a lot of what you need already in your existing applicant flow.
Okay, I'm getting some other questions, and I don't know if this is an answerable one, but somebody asks, are these figures and recommendations also applicable for LATAM markets, Latin American markets?
That's a great question. These were US-based marketing surveys, but that's a great question.
What's your feeling?
I think fundamentally what we're talking about is human behavior. And, when it comes to trust and building trust through financial transactions, I don't think it necessarily matters what market. I don't know any human enters into a financial transaction and says, I would love to not know what's going on behind the scenes. I'd love to not know where my money is going. I'd love to not be sure if I'm going to get a claim paid, right? So I think it's fair to say that kind of the fundamentals are there. In terms of the drivers, that first slide, those cut across culture as well. We have the goal, brand, context. Yeah,
I would imagine that there could be differences. They would likely be marginal for the reasons that you're saying, that these are kind of universal human traits. Although you could imagine, if anything, in societies that were lower trust, you would have more of a requirement, or at least more skepticism about the provider. There at the same time, there may not be an expectation of transparency in that case.
The what trust looks different in culture, right? So that's important, but the element of trust is necessary. If this is a trusted entity and I just need to know that I'm in this safe space, right? Culturally, yes. If it's I need all of this, then yeah. So yeah. Can
I throw one more at you there? The questions are just coming in pretty fast now. This is a bit of a softball, I think, and it's one that maybe all our panelists can keep in mind as the discussion goes on. Do you see significant differences in customer profiles by generation?
Yeah, absolutely. It's what's really interesting about this too is I feel like millennials got bagged on a lot, and I'm an elder millennial. But this whole want it fast, have to have it now, Amazon culture. There was this big drive towards that, and it was like, blame the millennials, they're ruining everything, and they want it all point of sale. But the research actually shows millennials want to talk to people for serious financial transactions. They actually really value the human engagement. So there is generational research that will show you there some segments of the population, depending on age, want to talk to people. Some don't want to have anything to do with the person on the other side. And it's not all as clear cut as you think. And it also has to do with the context of whether or not that person has experience having purchased a policy before previously. So I would take that down even another layer and say, yes to age, yes to generation, but also to experience. And when we think about socioeconomic status and experience and exposure to financial planning, that becomes even more critical and important, because people will walk away from a buying experience who need insurance the most because they do not feel they have the agency to make the purchase. So it's incredibly important.
Okay, one more question, because I think I was thinking about reserving this one, and also I think that since we're making this a panel discussion, I would welcome some comments from Craig and Mark. For some reason, Mark, you were listed as Doug Cohen, but we know you're Mark.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Anyway,
I'm a little younger than Doug, I think.
Anyway, let me address this other question. Why I have to interpret this. Why are insurers finding it difficult to reinvent product design to add end user experiences derived from various customer journeys and their evolving needs?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to gloss on this, I think it means that how do you shape product design in response to these inputs?
So I don't know that they're necessarily having trouble. I don't know that I would use that language. I think what I would say is I think there's some hesitation in product redesign because of the lack of experience potentially with the kind of the new approach in looking at product. I will say, having just come out of Swiss Re, out of a reinsurer, and then being in a very interesting space right now at a digital distributor, there is actually a lot of effort going into product redesign to really meet people where there are with new product and policy features in our space, because of the recognition and the understanding, but because a lot of this hasn't been done or was done for a different purpose. I think that's where, to use the word trouble, but that's where kind of the slowdown is happening right now. But I truly believe, particularly coming out of the pandemic, with the change in the way people are working and what's happening right now in terms of economic conditions, that new products are going to be coming out fast and furious over the next couple of months or next couple of years rather, to really meet people where they're at in terms of product experience.
Yeah, of course. And Mark, I'm going to ask you the same question in a minute or two, but of course, product innovation is a huge topic these days, but it's especially relevant to this discussion because the better you know the customer, the more you know about what their potential needs are. And those could be some rather important discoveries that which is to say things you didn't know before about protection products that they might need, value-added services that they might need. So Mark, how about you chime in with your opinion?
Yeah, well, I think one of the challenges, and I talk a little bit about this later, is exactly to that point, right? Basically, being able to aggregate the customer data, into a single source of truth, right? Have that 360-degree view of the customer. Easier said than done. In our legacy environments today, where we have disparate data. We have claims data over multiple systems, policy data over multiple systems, pulling that together, right? So that then we can do the analytics to better understand our customers. What do our most valued customers look like? How do we recommend, what's our next best action, right? What would be our recommendation? What are their needs? How do they segment out, which Nichole talked a little bit about, right? They segment out by age, by generation, by experience. As she mentioned, really, if you look at it, direct to consumer today, right? Less than 20% is actually closed in the digital channel. People still, want to talk to somebody to better understand coverage, better understand price, whether that person's sitting in the direct to consumer call center as a licensed agent, or whether they're sitting in a broker's office.
So they may really appreciate the opportunity to shop online, not necessarily to buy online.
Exactly. So we need to be able to do the analytics, whether that's channel behavior, whether that's product, and along the lines of the customer and over the entire value chain. If we're going to be able to understand, how do we best personalize their experience? How do we personalize added value services, whether those are proactive, they're preventative, where along that value chain are the new opportunities for us to expand the value proposition, beyond what traditionally has been the claims moment of truth, which today is almost table stakes in a lot of customer segments' minds. They expect that. That's not the differentiator. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on, but hopefully that helps.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So Nichole, we came off the screen share there. Did you get to your final thoughts?
I did, yeah.
Okay, great. I
Yep.
wasn't sure what slide we were on. So Craig, please feel free to take it away.
Sounds good. Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, Anthony. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to be with you. I thought I would share maybe some broad thoughts. This is obviously the topic on everyone's mind, particularly coming out of the pandemic, because I think it was often said that there were certain initiatives in place prior to the pandemic, decades of work around digital and applications, and the pandemic just accelerated everything. But I think a few broader thoughts. I often look at kind of other pieces of information. It's really easy to look outside of our industry and get a view of how things outside of our industry are changing the customer experience inside our industry. But I also think it's a fascinating time to look at trends, to look at things happening within the insurance industry, to follow some people, to gain perspective, because I think the challenge as an incumbent carrier in this space, I haven't met a carrier who says, who hasn't said, I have 150 things to do and I can solve for 3 to 5 of them at a time. So it's a very long runway. And that's why we're 2022 and we're still talking about some of these things. But I think to start with, and we've talked about some of this, you know, the research even coming out of the pandemic, the research around customer experience, particularly in the P&C space, would lead you to a few different areas. Mark just hit on this in that, you know, we've seen even in conversion of customers who start in a digital platform, very few are converted digitally, right? They still want some advice and counsel. It may not be between 9 and 3 on Main Street. It could be through chat. It could be through Web, Excel, what have you. But clearly, when you look at the whole insurance value chain, right, a lot of focus placed on new business placement. You think about renewal, you think about the claims experience, you think about billing, you think about so many things that go into this. There's opportunity, but I think that the challenge becomes, you know, much of the research would tell you it's not digital for every interaction all of the time. There's some interesting research that I look back at often. It actually goes back to 2018. I think Bain looked at just different transactions in insurance and opportunities to annoy the customer with very little opportunity to actually delight the customer, and opportunities to delight the customer where much of the industry isn't focused. And so I think when we think about the future customer experience, looking at it through the lens of today, and that fact that it's not digital all the time, when you think of normal transactions, right? When you think about policy renewal, when you think about getting endorsements, when you think about those are things that have a high likelihood to annoy the customer if they don't happen accurately, if they don't happen quickly. When you start to get into things like claim resolution, when you start to get into things like advice and counsel about risk, you move out of kind of digital more into human interaction, but a huge opportunity to delight the customer with less risk in actually annoying the customer. So again, just thinking about some of these trends, some of the things that we've learned from the past. And again, coming out of COVID, it's not all digital all the time. The other area I'd hit on real quick is it's hard to think about the future customer experience, particularly in the P&C space, without thinking about what's happening around distribution. And obviously, this is where I spend my time. This is a lot of focus for me. But for carriers operating through this channel, this weighs heavily on that customer experience. And we think about our brand and how does our brand stack up next to an agency's brand, and how does the customer think of us? And you know, we're delivering on parts of the insurance promise, and the agency is delivering on parts of the insurance promise. And so, you know, this is a reality. We talk about omni-channel, but the reality is in most agency carrier relationships, there are clearly things that we do. There are clearly things that the agent can do, but there are things that we can both do. Right. And so how do we come up with one common experience for the customer? I think the interesting thing as we look at P&C distribution, you know, M&A is rampant. we're seeing larger and larger firms emerge. And I think it creates a really interesting potential as we look at customer experience, because we have much larger firms who are involved in all aspects of insurance. And so, oftentimes when we get into customer experience, when we get into who can deliver on the customer experience, and we take it back to a channel perspective, we talk about agency, we talk about captive agency, independent agency, we talk about direct. And almost like the consumer is going to make decisions based on channel preference. And I've looked at research in the past that showed channel preference based on customer segments. My question always is, does the customer even know, right? Does the customer know I'm dealing with I'm choosing a direct carrier portal or I'm choosing an agency portal? I don't think the customer really cares, right? The customer wants a solution to their problem, regardless of where they find it. And so I think through scale, through what we're seeing happen with P&C distribution, the potential for the customer experience is changing. And this is an example. This is an agency, albeit a large agency hub, but this was the launch this week of their front-end personalized rating site, which, oh, by the way, would look very similar to many direct carrier channels. So the potential is there, right? This is front end, but I think the challenge, or the opportunity, I should say, that this creates as we think about carrier and agency relationships is, if agencies are able to deploy this technology on the front end and go back to the work that agencies need to do, or carriers need to do, so you think about claim resolution, if the experience from a digital perspective or the experience from a customer experience perspective looks much different than what they saw on the front end, how are we going to have to solve for that? And probably, how are we going to have to solve for that much quickly? The last two areas I'll hit on quickly, because I think we've been on this really interesting journey probably over the past seven or 8 years in InsurTech. And I think InsurTech, both from a carrier perspective and both from a solution perspective, has been focused on improvement of the customer experience. And I think there are some lessons that we can draw from some of the full stack InsurTech carriers who are going to revolutionize the customer experience. And this is just a graph on stock performance as compared to their IPO, not the best indicator of their success, but an indicator. And I think that maybe some of the focus on just revolutionizing the customer experience, the question is, was it focused on the front end? Right? What did the claims experience look like? What did other aspects of that insurance value chain look like? Right? It's great that the front end was handled well, but what did the full experience look like? Again, not the best view, but I do think there are some lessons learned. Not that these firms are not solving for things that are going to be leverageable in the future. I firmly believe that, but it doesn't feel very good when my Hippo stock is 93 cents right now. But I do think there are clear lessons that we can learn from here. And a really good follow in this space, if you want to look at InsurTech, particularly from the perspective of how InsurTech is being used by startups and being used by incumbents, I would say to think about ideas to revolutionize the customer experience. Adrian Jones, who is actually in the investment side of InsurTech, but brings a really interesting perspective on what's happening in that space. But I heard him say recently on a podcast, that insurance is a game of inches, right? And we've seen these large scale InsurTech investments that are going to revolutionize customer experience, and the small wins, may be the spot that we're focused on. But again, going back to in our space between carriers and agencies, understanding where those small ones need to be. The last part that I'll talk about is, I think as we think about customer experience, and as we think about what it looks like in the future, and we talked a little bit about this today in one of the questions. We know that in our industry we have oftentimes done a poor job of solving for risk, particularly emerging risk. And in a world where risk is becoming more and more prevalent, where uncertainty is becoming more and more prevalent, we learned that through the pandemic. an event that largely was not insured. How will we solve for that? And I've got to believe that, in the future, this certainly exists today, but in the future, whether it's new products, whether it's new ways to deploy our product, whether it's better front end risk management, I think there's a huge opportunity in our industry to continue to think about, how do we solve for the customer? How do we solve for risk for the customer? And a couple areas to think about. I think the world of embedded, which is being talked about more and more, is an area not only from a convenience perspective, but you could start to see new solutions for new forms of risk. I think we've been talking about telematics as an industry for at least 2 decades. And I often wonder, when we talk about telematics, do we talk about it from the perspective of rating variables and selecting good drivers and selecting bad drivers? Or is there meaningful data and insight that we can bring as an industry, that we can bring to drivers to make things safer? And I think when you look at the work that like GM is doing in this space and the work that Tesla is doing in this space, I think we're at the start of that. And this is an interesting firm, getting back in a little bit on the InsurTech theme, but marked is, I would call it industry veterans, some really great, bright people who are focused on InsurTech solutions that I would say are pointing insurance in areas where solutions are not currently found. So, I think their mantra is, how do we protect people from harm and loss where the traditional insurance product is not? So I think that last area, really thinking about how do we solve for risk in a world that's growing increasingly uncertain, is going to be more critically important in the future.
A question has come up for you, Mark. How much do new channels like embedded threaten the insurer-agent relationship?
I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. I meant to ask that to Craig.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I think it depends. I'll give the classic cop out. If you think about one of the biggest embedded examples that's been announced in the past couple of years, it was the product liability coverage for Amazon. That was launched through a broker. There was a broker who put that together with a panel of carriers. So it could be opportunity. Right, clearly not broad opportunity, but it could be opportunity. I would say in certain product lines, it could definitely threaten agencies. I think particularly in the personal line space, there's no doubt that it could threaten the traditional P&C model. But in other product lines, it could be significant opportunity.
Yeah. So Mark, sorry about that mistake. So you had an answer on the tip of your tongue. I was wondering also whether this is, I don't know if Craig was saying this, but an opportunity for brokers, for distributors to also be product innovators, maybe in partnership with carriers.
Well, I think that is the future. I think that in order to provide a seamless experience for the customer across the entire journey that they have, the entire life cycle, as well as to be able to gather and aggregate all of that information across the life cycle, basically carriers and brokers have got to be working together, right? Today it's just disjointed, the experience is interrupted, it's not seamless, it creates a lot of that friction. As we said, brokers and agents are here to stay. People, some people need that. And for more complicated coverages, they need advice, just like you do for any of financial, products. I think from an embedded standpoint, that's what we see as sort of the expansion of what the future customer wants, right? How do they want to buy? Where do they want to buy? And here again, it's going to depend a little bit on the customer segment. It's going to depend on the experience, and it's going to depend on the complexity of the product, right? If you look today, really the only straight through products we have that truly are straight through processing, for the most part, are, private passenger auto. As soon as I get into multi-car, now I've got some challenges, right? It's just, the length, the questions we have to ask. Nobody's going to go through 20 pages on, the web and understand the discounts and understand, the coverages, et cetera. So I think, what we're seeing is the ecosystem is expanding. Embedded is part of that to basically meet what certain customer segments want in the way that they want to do business and the way that they want, the kinds of interactions that they want. I don't think we can stand in the way of that.
Yeah. Well,
right?
since we're on this topic, I thought maybe there's a way of throwing it to Nichole. And, we tend to think of the upper end customer. I recently did an interview with the senior vice president at Pure, which is a P&C company that services high net worth clients. But there's the other end of the spectrum, and it's potentially not only a great opportunity, but also, you might say, service to humanity. So think about maybe not microinsurance per se, but when we think about the massive insurance gap when it comes to life insurance, but one of the problems of getting life insurance to that segment is that the values of the policies are very low. So automation could play a major role in getting through to that customer and still delivering a better customer experience. Nichole?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what you're referring to right now is kind of being able to lower the actual bar and access to the policies through automation, through making the process more efficient, right? And the cost, I mean, listen, the cost of the policies that we deliver also has to take into account what's it cost for me to deliver this policy. So the more effective, the more technology that you bring into that, really make these things cost effective, you can reach new markets in that way. What I don't want to do though is diminish kind of the agency that we were talking about earlier in particular markets that don't necessarily yet have access. Or might not have the confidence to finish the sale, or might be concerned that, they're not buying the right thing. And I think, we sell a broad range of life products at Ethos. And, we see across the spectrum of products that even on the smaller sales, people want to come in, they want to have a conversation, they have a couple of questions, they just want that little bit of help. So, but yeah, absolutely. The more effective and efficient we can make our processes in terms of automation and use, then the better off we all are, because that's cost savings too. And that means we can reach more people, we can do more ad spend, we can do more marketing, we can get to different markets. Yeah, so absolutely, everybody wins.
Well, another audience, Mark, I know we're impinging on your presentation time, but I believe in keeping the conversation going as much as we can and taking the audience questions when we get them. This one is a little difficult to understand. So I don't know if I can read it literally, but I think we can read between the lines. It's certain that increase in premium prices will not increase customer experience. So what's the number one thing which is an impediment to improving customer experience by notches or by degrees? Is it the industry culture? Is it product design? Is it lack of data? Is it analytics, silos, which I guess all of these things dragging down the response mechanism? I mean, it seems to me that increase in premium prices could increase customer experience. But if we can just take the question, what's the impediment to improving between these different things? Industry culture, product design, lack of data, and analytics and silos. Anybody want to take that, Mark?
Yeah, sure. I think, over the last several years, insurers have been investing a lot in data infrastructure, in aggregating data, and trying to get that single source of truth, right? And to date, I think underwriting, actuarial, pricing have been the beneficiaries of a lot of that, right? The better the data is, the higher the quality, the better we understand it by segment or risk, right? The better it will be, our underwriting and our pricing, right? And the more customers can feel comfortable that they're getting a fair price, right? So I think that that's important. But where we've really got to accelerate things, I think, in the industry here again, is how do we move that forward to better understand channel behaviors and performance, to better understand, our products, right? And, what customers are leveraging those products, what customers are not leveraging those products. How can we make those more personal instead of one size fits all, right? A lot of customers don't understand, the discounts that the industry offers. They don't understand the coverages and really what level of coverage they need to have, right? A student liability coverage on auto for a student with no assets is a lot different than a liability that I need with, 4 cars and, 4 teenagers, driving. And a lot of people just don't understand that. So being able to get those analytics and, from my perspective, we've been talking a lot about, digital first. We need to move to insights first as a mandate. That is what's going to give us the information to really understand our customers, understand how to have more personal value propositions, understand how we can better position our products to them, and be more transparent, as well as improve our pricing and our underwriting, for the customer and that experience.
So Mark, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I cannot echo that enough. And actually, Mark, I think you opened with the biggest impediment, which is getting access to the data in an organized way to truly understand the customer and be able to build out a true picture of the customer need. And I love that insights first. I wish we built every piece of software in this industry insights first.
And part of the challenge there is the whole who owns the customer and who owns the data. The carrier, the broker, who owns that relationship? This is where I think it's imperative. And I see this more and more. I have some clients who've been, rolling some new platforms out and new capabilities out to support their brokers. But, to really change the business model of insurance, which I think is what needs to change. They've got to come together. We have, open banking, right? In Europe, how do we share data across the ecosystem in banking? Similar initiative is starting on open insurance, right? How do we better share that information? How do we share the insights that we gather from that? How do we support each other to create, the integration that we need between our platforms so that we can have a seamless experience for the customer? I think that, that's critical.
But listen, this is a question I really wanted to put to Craig. How do you negotiate this question of customer ownership? And what does the collaboration look like between the carrier and the broker or agent or agency? And how might that differ across different lines of business?
Yeah, and Mark, you nailed it. I mean, I think this is like the key opportunity, and probably what's emerged more over the past 5 years than any time prior. And it is that the agency owns the customer ultimately, right? But from a contractual standpoint, but I think that we as an industry, we as a carrier need to get comfortable that we both own the customer, right? We both own the customer experience. But I think because of somewhat, traditional thinking, right? Contractually, the agency owns the customer. They're paid to service them. They stay in their swim lane. We stay in our swim lane. And those, if we're going to solve for the things that we're talking about, that the ultimate thinking needs to change. But you do have the reality on data, right? How's the data used? Who owns the data? But these are the types of things, Mark, I think what you said about insights, these are the types of things that if you're not having that conversation, right, regardless of who contractually owns the customer, regardless of who contractually owns the data, how do we leverage this in this environment to solve for it? If we don't have those conversations, we might even be solving for, just some of the wrong things. But
Exactly.
this is a barrier, this is a limitation, but these are the things that need to be outlined, because they have data, we have data, they have different data, we have different data. There are firms who are trying to figure this out, but to the question, this is one of those silos. This is one of those impediments to making progress.
Exactly. And I really don't think it's a choice. I had a client tell me one time that, works through broker distribution and was very frustrated. I don't have the data I need. So I'm just going to be the best product manufacturer in the business. How do you do that? If you don't understand the customer, if you don't understand their needs,
right? That's exactly what we were talking about.
How do you get there? So I think we sometimes think it's a choice. It's not really a choice. And if our brokers don't have the data to understand, how, what's the next best action? What does our most value, what's the customer?
We lost Mark for a second there. Until he comes back, I'm going to introduce another audience question. And I just want to say we are within 4 minutes of the allotted time. So this is a great question to follow up with what we're just talking about. It's another one of the great challenges. And the audience member says, how can we make the correlation between the investment in customer experience and the return on the investment? The traditional insurance companies are struggling to make investments in customer experience without understanding the ROI, especially in the post-pandemic era where digital services are ruling the world. So Nichole, would you like to take a stab at the connection between investing in
customer experience and ROI?
And do you have a soft ROI? Do you have a hard ROI? How do you think about the return?
Yeah, so this is a struggle because I think some of this takes patience, right? There's a long tail. You can look at things like persistency. Do you have kind of early lapses, people leaving you early in terms of your policy? But again, these are patient metrics, and organizations don't always necessarily want patience. I would, if you are in an organization that is lacking in patience and wants kind of more immediate look at things, then you can try and say, let's do some time studies. Let's understand that if we do X increase to the customer experience, that tightens it by this number of minutes. And we believe that each incremental minute we save is actually going to increase our close rate by X. I mean, those are the types of formulas that organizationally, every organization is going to have to sit down and think about. And that to me is also a cross-functional conversation, right? Customer experience needs to be at the table. You need to understand what it's going to take in terms of resource availability to launch these types of things, right? So you have to kind of tighten that. So you need one metric that's likely a composite metric, right? That comes in, and that's a cross-functional agreement within the organization. Early metric, time service, cost investment, long tail metrics, and monitoring what's the impact of this over time on our customer happiness, persistency. Also, you could always go with NPS, right? Everybody loves a good net promoter score. So there's some existing metrics that you could use as well to start to make the case to create better customer experience, right?
So Mark, we missed you for a couple of minutes
this
there.
Is sort of the traditional witching hour where 3 p.m. the internet goes down. I don't get it, but
well, listen. I really wanted to put this question to you, Craig. I don't want to deprive you from an opportunity to answer. We are getting to the end, and I think we're going to jump ahead to your slide after we've gotten your answer on this, Mark. The question, which I read out while you were gone, is essentially how do you connect investment in customer experience with ROI?
With what?
ROI, return on investment.
ROI. Well, that's an interesting question, because what I'm seeing in the industry today is more and more of the initiatives have to have a hard ROI, i.e. headcount reduction, cost reduction, rental car reduction, and improving the, time to close on claims, et cetera. It's very difficult, right, to measure how much a specific initiative, let's say retention, an initiative to improve customer experience that we measure as part of retention. Well, did we get that retention really because of that initiative? Or did we get it for some other reason? And I think that's part of the challenge that we have today and why many view that the industry is behind. Because you have to have a level of confidence that as a program of initiatives, one, we understand what the customer needs and what they want. We understand where our friction points are. This is our strategy and our program to get there, right? And overall in aggregate, can we measure progress through profitable growth, through customer satisfaction, which should be measured, through our acquisition rates, maybe by target segment, right, and our retention rates by target segment. But I think that's part of the challenge. It's not as the level of confidence in how those initiatives are contributing, and the KPIs are not as solid as cost reduction KPIs.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I think,
I'm right.
Right.
I would say that anything directed at growth is going to be somewhat speculative.
Yeah, yeah, and I think if you look back from my perspective, I was going to say 20 years, right? 20 years ago, we were talking about core systems replacement. What's the top three thing, on most of the analyst reports that we're going to be investing in over the next 5 years?
Core systems
replacement. Interesting thing about core systems replacement is one of the rules of thumb is no modifications. Stick with the core. As we move to SaaS in cloud, you're going to have even less flexibility. Mm-hmm. So is that agenda really driving us towards innovation? Because one size does not fit all. That's what I think we can be comfortable with. So, is our current legacy system renewal and replacement going to get us to a point where we will find that we are not as enabled as we need to be to really address the evolution of the customer experience? So a clear strategy, that drives us in that direction, I think is critical. The core systems are enablers, but they shouldn't be driving, our customer experience.
Very good. So I think, by the way, that would be a great topic for our next webinar with Oz to talk about the relationship of core system replacement to digital transformation. So I'm going to bring back. I'm having a little trouble here. Sorry. So Mark, let's have a few words from you in closing. On behalf of Oz, tell us a little bit about who Oz is, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you for the opportunity. Overall, Oz, we are a digital consulting firm. We partner with our clients to help them drive their digital strategy and their digital transformations. We are based in South Florida, but we also have innovation centers in Latin America and in Asia. From a kind of core capabilities and offering standpoint, like I said, we focus on digital transformation and strategy. We focus on workflow automation, particularly in the claims and the underwriting areas. Also analytics and insights, things like customer lifetime value, things like next best action. And then also on, really the integration, the data and application integration, around a lot of these core systems, but also in terms of being able to help our clients, move to more of a, data lake and get that, single source of truth. So those are a lot of the areas we work primarily with, middle to large, P&C, carriers in the market.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's been great working with Oz, great client for Insurance Innovation Reporter. I'd like to thank the audience today for a lot of great questions. I realize there are one or two more, and we also got an interesting chat contribution. I thank you for that. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. The audience members, I want you to know you'll receive a recording link for today's webcast during the next few days, and you'll be able to access it on demand through the coming year. So we'd like to thank everybody for attending today's webcast, Delivering the Insurance Customer of the Future Experience, sponsored by Oz Digital Consulting and hosted by Insurance Innovation Reporter. This event is copyright 2022 by Pembury Strategic Services, IIR's parent company. The presentations are the intellectual property of the presenters, who are solely responsible for their content and their opinions. On behalf of our speakers, Nicole Myers of Ethos, Craig Welsh of Westfield Insurance, and Mark Smith of Oz Digital Consulting, I'd like to once again thank all of our attendees for their time today. This is Anthony O'Donnell of Insurance Innovation Reporter, wishing you a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.